Ruth Davidson joins me now from Edinburgh. Well, Ruth Davidson, can we start on the independence referendum? Nicola Sturgeon has said she'll make up her mind whether to call another one later on this year. David Mundell was going on about it in the lead-up to your party conference, which didn't happen because of the snow. Yes. You said on this programme in July 2016 that if Nicola Sturgeon does call another referendum, the British government should not stop her. Is that still your view?
Well, look, Nicola Sturgeon already tried. She tried it in March of last year, and myself, the Prime Minister, the Secretary of State, were all pretty clear that then wasn't the time for it. And I think you got a pretty strong and resounding response from the Scottish people that took away a third of our MPs at the snap general election that happened just a few weeks later. So there's no groundswell of support for it. There's no particular mandate for it. I don't doubt that Nicola Sturgeon will try for her entire political life to call as many referendums as she thinks she can have until she wins, because she's never found a referendum result that she doesn't like. But, you know, the country voted pretty substantially to stay in the United Kingdom, and I want to defend that. Right,
but on this programme you said, and I quote, constitutionally the UK government shouldn't block it, no.
Well, I will continue to argue my case that there shouldn't be one because the people of Scotland were promised...
I understand that, but that's not an answer to the question I'm asking you.
Well, look, I mean, this is all very hypothetical. We know that Nicola Sturgeon always wants one, but she's got this high-wire act with her own party about when she thinks that she can call one. The reason we know she wants one is because she told us the day after the Brexit vote happened, back in June of last year, she said that she'd already got instructed Scottish Government officials to drop the necessary legislation.
And I take your point, it's hypothetical, but it was just as hypothetical when you said constitutionally the UK government shouldn't block it. No, well, now do you stand by that?
Constitutionally, the way in which referendums happen is by having agreement between the Scottish and UK government. So if Nicola Sturgeon wants to call it, then she's going to have to enter into some form of negotiation with the UK government. But she's got to demonstrate the things that I talked about in March of last year when she tried, which is, one, there's got to be support for it amongst the country. There isn't. Two, there's got to be some form of trigger for it. There hasn't been. And three, she's got to explain to the country that she promised that she wouldn't do this for, that it would be for a generation, why she's dragging us all back there again, and people don't want it. And also she's got to prove that she has a mandate for it, which after losing her majority in Holyrood, I don't believe that she does.
So the answer to do you stick by the statement constitutionally the UK government shouldn't block it, no, is that
constitutionally these things are decided by agreement between the UK and Scottish government. That is the test case that we had in 2014.
The UK government has made perfectly clear it will block another referendum.
Well, Nicola Sturgeon's got to show that she's got both the mandate and the support for it, and that something's changed, and I don't think she can show any of these things at the moment.
You said the other day you would back a legal challenge to the continuity bill that the SNP is proposing.
Well, I don't want this to go to court. I actually don't think that we should be where we are right now. I want to see agreement. Actually, I know the PM and the First Minister have both said that too. But I do think there's an issue about the Scottish Government claiming to stand on a high horse of defending devolution, but running roughshod over the position of the presiding officer that something is ultra vires to the Parliament, that it's outside of its competency, and then saying that they've got to force it through as an emergency bill to allow something that's very contentious, it's a very finely balanced point of law, is only going to be given 3 days debate about it for members. So I do think that there's a real issue with the way in which this has been handled this week.
You said you would back you would welcome a legal challenge.
Well, I think that there would have to be one. No, I'm not saying that I would initiate it, but I don't see a way if something is ultra vires to the Parliament and it's pushed through by the government anyway, that it doesn't end up in court. Now, I don't want it to get there. I really don't. I want there to be agreement, and I know from speaking to my colleagues in the Westminster government that they want agreement on clause 11 of the Brexit withdrawal bill too. But I do think that there was a real issue this week of the SNP deciding to introduce something against the wishes of the presiding officer of the Parliament, who'd taken legal advice from the law officers of the Parliament, of the legal advisors of the Parliament, and then saying that not only are we going to do it against their advice, but we're going to ram it through as an emergency bill, so there's only 3 days debate about it. I mean, I do have a real issue with that.
This is connected with the first thing we were talking about. There are reports in some of the papers this morning that senior figures in the SNP are worried that Ken McIntosh, the presiding officer, ruling the continuity bill to be ultra vires could set a precedent for any attempt to have another independence referendum. Now, do you think it's possible the presiding officer could rule on very similar grounds, in a way, that the Scottish Parliament calling an independence referendum is ultra vires?
I actually think that the only precedents that have been set this week, and there have been two in Holyrood, the first is that the precedent has been set that for the first time a Scottish government has rammed through a bill against the suggestion and the ruling of a presiding officer. That's the first precedent. And the second precedent is this is the first time that emergency legislation has been considered without unanimous agreement across the Parliament, and that was rammed through too. So these are the only two precedents that have been set this week in terms of Holyrood.
Could that apply to an independence referendum?
Well, I think that the presiding officer, every presiding officer that we've had, has always taken the best legal advice that's available to him on each and every bill as they are presented to him or her. Let's not forget Tricia, so him or her. So I do think, if you're talking about the specific instance of a independence referendum, we've already got what has been referred to by both sides as the gold standard of how that happens, and that has been through, it was called the Edinburgh Agreement the last time around. You can call it whatever agreement you want, but it's agreement between the Scottish and UK governments, because constitutional issues are reserved. And that's probably one of the reasons why the presiding officer ruled that this withdrawal bill that's being put forward by the SNP is ultra vires.
Now, part of your appeal to people in Scotland was that you were a new, fresh, young form of Tory leader who was prepared to stand up for things.
I'm still in my 30s, so I'm not that old yet.
Yeah,
Gordon.
okay. No, it's not your age.
I'm clinging on with my fingertips.
It's not your age I was going to question. It was your preparedness to stand up for your own beliefs. You said you were in favour of being in the single market. You said that getting rid of freedom of movement wasn't a priority for you. You seem to have been backtracking ever since. I mean, is there actually anything you disagree with Theresa May about on Brexit?
Well, look, as with the Prime Minister, was on the side of Remain. So we both disagree with the result that happened, but we have to recognise as Democrats that 17.5 million people across the country, including over 1 million in Scotland, voted for this. So yeah, there's lots of things about the Brexit process that I don't like, but my view is that it is going to happen. It was voted on across the United Kingdom. If politicians decide that a decision is so big, it has to be taken outside of representative democracy and handed as direct democracy to every single voter in the country, you've got to listen to them.
What did you mean when you said after the referendum that Britain should stay in the single market?
Well, I was quite clear that, no, I was asked if I supported that. I said quite clearly I do support it and did support it because I had campaigned for Remain. Now, I don't get to have everything I want out of that referendum result because my side of the argument didn't win, and I'm very sad about that. But it's about what can we do on the way out of here to ensure that we have the best opportunity of mitigating risks that Brexit presents to us, and also exploiting any opportunities. Now, one of the things that I've been arguing for very hard, including directly face-to-face with the Prime Minister, is that we have to make sure that we get fishing right. Now, I was very pleased in this speech that she gave on Friday to hear, I think for the first time in one of the big set speeches from the Prime Minister, fishing being mentioned by name about the principles that we would support and what we're taking into the room, because even the most Remainy of Remainers like myself becomes a Brexiteer when it comes to fishing, because the CFP has not served Scotland's fishermen well. And I've got a job and a duty on issues that are of severe importance to particular sectors in Scotland to speak up, and that's exactly what me and my MPs have been doing on this issue.
You're not speaking up, for example. I mean, Luke, let me give you...
No, you asked me to give you an example where I'd gone into bat against Theresa May. And I'm saying that I sat down in a room, I've talked to her, I've talked to the Secretary of State for DEFRA, I've sat down with the Chancellor to talk about the importance of fishing and how, there is a particular route that we can go down to maximise that. So you asked for an example, and that was one in which I gave you.
Here's my ultra-condensed version of Theresa May's speech. These are all direct quotes. We are leaving the single market. We are clear that as we leave the EU, free movement of people will come to an end. And the UK has been clear it's leaving the customs union. Do you agree with all of that?
Look, I'm a centre-right politician. I want to see free trade. Now, I would be quite happy if we were looking at other ways of doing it. Of course I would. That's why I voted and campaigned for Remain. But the Prime Minister has said that she wants to have a comprehensive free trade agreement that covers all of that. Well, let's give her the space to negotiate in the room, because that's what this speech on Friday was about. It was about giving the negotiating team in the room the ability to look at these,
on the subject of negotiations. You also argued after the referendum that the Scottish Government should have a role in the Brexit negotiations. What happened to that idea?
Well, as I understand it, there's been regular meetings of the JMC. The next one's the JMC.
No, that's about discussing the devolution of powers. You were arguing that the Scottish Government should have a role in the Brexit negotiations with Europe.
Well, there's been regular contact at an official and at ministerial level between the UK and EU governments. But I didn't say, and I was quite clear about this when Nicola Sturgeon said she wanted a seat at the negotiating table, that my worry was that given that she wanted to be in Europe and out of the UK, my worry was what side of the table she wanted to sit on, Gordon.
Right, but the bottom line here is that what started off as, look, I'm going to take a different line, I'm pro-European, actually ends up as agreeing pretty much with everything. I take your point about fishing that Theresa May says. I mean, you know, as a football crowd might say to you, you're just Theresa May in disguise.
Well, I think there are significant differences between Theresa May and I. As much as I like Philip, I'm probably not going to marry him. However, I think there's a real issue about where it is we are in the negotiations. My job as the leader of the Scottish Conservative Party, the leader of the opposition in Scotland, is to make sure that those industries and sectors in Scotland that have particular concerns or have recognised opportunities that they can get out of Europe, is to make sure that they can get access to the UK government. And that's exactly what I've been doing. I've been feeding in what they say and making sure they've been able to sit down with ministers themselves so that Scotland's voice is heard, and not just by the separatists of the SNP that want to use this as a lever to break up Britain.
Given your slippage in the polls, are you still going to be the next First Minister?
Well, I think that we can be, and we've seen how we should be, because we already have more MSPs than the SNP did in the term before they took office. So the polls said we couldn't beat Labour in 2016. We did. That we couldn't get 150
So you are going to be the next
year. I very much hope so. And they said that we couldn't get 13 MPs in June. We've also had 3 by-elections since then, where we've gone up and up and up. So you say we've hit peak, and yet still more and more people across Scotland are voting for us. So I'll keep doing my job to the best of my ability, and I hope that the people of Scotland can appreciate the work the whole Conservative team is putting in.
Are you going to be the next Prime Minister?
No.